All right, we're going to get started. Appreciate everybody being here tonight. We're going to be in Mark 11 through 16 tonight. You want to get in that general area. We'll walk through that a little bit this evening. Before we do that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael.
Let's sing a couple of verses of familiar hymn. I'm going to say familiar. And hopefully I don't care what I'm trying to do. Leaning on the everlasting. What a fellowship,
what a joy divine, lean on the everlasting arms. What a bliss, what a joy combined, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning on the everlasting arms. What have I to dread? What have I to fear? Leaning on the everlasting arms. I have blessed peace with my Lord so dear. Leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning on the everlasting arms.
All right, thank you, Michael. All right, Mark 11 through 16, we're going to be at tonight. We are wrapping up our study of the Gospel of Mark. We're about to move into a study of 1 Thessalonians over the next week. So we're kind of moving through several more books. We have crossed the halfway point, and so we've got a few more chunks left, and then we'll be done with reading through the New Testament in 2021. Tonight is that final time frame of the ministry of Jesus. Much of what we've looked at in the Gospel of Mark, as far as the miracles, the healings, the teaching, a lot of that is pushed to the side, and that's not the focal point in this final section. There is some teaching. There's not really much by way of miracle. It's much more focused in on this final time frame in the life of Jesus. And so a couple of things that are going to jump out in particular to us are the opposition that Jesus faces. And we'll dig into that a little bit. And then we'll have the trial of Jesus and kind of what goes along with that. So kind of as we've done with our other classes, if you would like to start in chapter 11, we'll kind of quickly move through. And then we'll come back and dig in a little bit deeper. So, as I mentioned, opposition is one of the big themes for this section. And so, in chapter 11 and 12, you're going to see that take place. Jesus entered into Jerusalem for this final time frame, and he's welcomed by the people and the religious leaders quite the opposite direction. They are opposed to him tremendously. In fact, they challenge him. And they kind of go back and forth with Jesus. He shares a story about them. They challenge him with some questions. He's able to answer those. And by the end of chapter 12, he's pretty well dealt with them. And there's not a lot of positive will between those two groups. They don't like Jesus. They're trying to work out a way to eliminate him, and they'll take care of that in chapters 14 and 15. Sandwiched in between those two things, in chapter 13, we have the section relating to what will ultimately be focused in on the fall of the temple and the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. There's a little bit that we think pertains to Jesus' return as well. But the focal point is the destruction of the temple. And then you move into chapters 14 and 15, we have the familiar Last Supper time frame, Jesus going to pray in the garden when he is arrested and put on trial. And by the end of chapter 15, we walk through the trial, we walk through the crucifixion and the death of Jesus. And then we come to chapter 16, and we have the resurrection. And I mentioned this in one of the videos, but if you don't watch the Facebook videos, you'll notice about halfway through chapter 16, your Bible will likely say something like this. Some of the earliest manuscripts do not include 16, 9 through 20. And so essentially there's some debate on whether they should be included. They're not in all of the earlier manuscripts. And for the most part, if you were to read through all of that, most of it's found in the other Gospels. There's not a lot of unique stuff there, so it's not, if you didn't use it, you're not missing anything vital other than, and I'm okay with us not having this part, that we can supposedly handle snakes and drink poison and not be hurt by it. I don't have any interest in handling snakes, and so I'm okay with leaving that part out. But it doesn't really fit with a lot of the rest of what we see in Scripture. It's odd to me that they would throw that in there. And so it wouldn't shock me if we found out it was not supposed to be in, but it wouldn't shock me if we found that it was supposed to be in there either. So either way, again, the focus of that final section is found elsewhere in the other Gospels, so we don't really miss out on anything vital for us. With all of that being said, go back to chapter 11 with me, and we're going to dig into Jesus' kind of dealing with the religious leaders and some of the opposition that he faced. This would be true whether you work somewhere or in your home life or really any situation where you are around multiple people. But let me ask this. What happens if someone continually undermines someone else's authority? Or what tends to take place in those situations?
There's an anger.
Okay. There's going to be some hostility.
Somebody's going to be angry.
Right. Somebody's going to be upset, right? That's not the kind of thing that you just kind of blow off and say, no big deal, right? I mean, imagine in a workplace where the boss or the manager says, this is what we're going to do, and somebody says, no, I don't think so. Somebody's going to be mad. It may not be the manager, it may not be that. Somebody's going to be mad because you don't do that, right? When someone has a position of authority, to say the opposite of them is going to create tremendous conflict and problems. And ultimately, as you walk through the ministry of Jesus and you get to the end of it, that's basically what happens, right? Jesus comes in with authority, but it's authority that is unrecognized by the religious leaders, right? They don't hold that he has authority over them. And so there's this kind of battle of the wills. Who is truly in charge? Who gets to decide what we're going to do? And this, I think, in a really simple way, explains how does Jesus go from a miracle doer and a healer to public enemy number one that they want to do. How does he get there? Well, it's some of his teaching, but much of it had to do with the authority factor. He was continually undermining their authority. Now, again, he wasn't actually undermining their authority. That was true authority. He was speaking what God wanted spoken, but their perceived authority, he was violating that. They felt like they had certain authority, and he kind of said, no, I'm not going to go along with the things that you're teaching or the things that you are doing. So just focusing in on this, what are the things that happen in this section that we read over last week, where Jesus either makes the religious leaders look bad, or he makes it clear that he has an authority that they don't? Any thoughts on some of the things that take place in these, especially these two chapters right here? What happens at the beginning of chapter 11? What's your heading say? The triumphal entry. Now, why is it a triumphal entry? What happens?
They don't believe him.
They don't believe him. But what's everybody else saying? Yeah, they're excited. basically saying, here comes our king. I mean, notice what is said down in verse 9. And those who went before and those who followed were shouting, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our father David. Hosanna in the highest. I mean, they're basically proclaiming this is it, right? Now, what's the problem? Well, it's not a problem with Jesus, but what's the problem for the religious leaders? That makes him an authority that they don't recognize. Right.
But again, the thing, they already have in there, so it's like, they don't accept it.
They're not going to accept it. If you go down to verse 15, this is kind of stoking the flames of contention here. It says, they came to Jerusalem, and he entered the temple and began to drive out those who sold and those who bought in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold business. And he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. And he was teaching them, saying to them, is it not written, my house should be called a house of prayer for all the nations, but you have made it a den of robbers. And the chief priests and the scribes heard it and were seeking a way to destroy him. So they feared him because all the crowd was astonished at his teaching. And when evening came, he went out of the city. Now you have to read between the lines just a little bit, although not really that much here. But how do you think they were feeling? Now, they want to destroy Jesus, but what happens when Jesus comes in and he starts looking stuff over and telling people you can't do this, and what's going on there?
Well, he's coming with authority, but at the same time, they think, the Pharisees and Sadducees think that's their temple.
Right.
That's where they worship. They don't accept nothing else. He comes with all this authority and practically throw them out. So they can't handle it.
I mean, imagine someone coming into your home and starting to do things and tell you what you are supposed to do and how things should be run in there. Probably not going to go over very well, right? Yeah, I mean, this is ultimately what we recognize is Jesus is in the right. All right, we see it, we understand Jesus is the Son of God. He is God. So it's his temple, right? He knows what it should have. And yet, on the flip side, right? If they don't recognize his authority, they don't care who he's claiming to be. As far as they're concerned, he's coming in and he's upending all of the stuff that they think is just fine. And that's not a thing that you just kind of say, we'll let it slide. You don't, and that's not what, they're not going to do that. Or you want to.
They also carry a cut or make their money off of what was being made in the temple, so that's how they affected it too.
I don't know for sure. It wouldn't shock me if there's some reason why they allowed this kind of thing to happen. I mean, because you can imagine how loud and maybe chaotic it would have been, but in that area, all the stuff going on. There's a reason why they let it happen. Go ahead.
Campus, who was one of the magistrates, the question, and persecuted, at the top, before going to the cross, was the one really that was in charge of this activity and what was going on. And it was planning and scheming, that they had no means being able to do that, especially in the place in which they were. And so, like you said, really did hit the heart of the ones who were most of the upper echelon of the Pharisees, and being that the one, for that reason, they brought Jesus to him first, to be questioned and sort of persecuted their cross.
Yeah, when they, Kim, did you see that we're having sound issues?
Yeah, I'm having troubles getting it pulled up on my phone, so I.
I can hear you just fine. That's not exactly what we're trying to go for. No offense to you, but, we're sorry for those that are online and we get it worked out. So you've got this authority issue, right? And then you go into chapter 12, and we've talked about this before with Jesus, but Jesus is oftentimes described as mild-mannered and he never caused a problem or anything, but you go into chapter 12, and Jesus basically, he stokes the fire even more at this point, right? He shares the parable of the tenants, which they absolutely understand is about them. He's condemning them because they are basically rejecting God's desire and doing their own thing. And so he creates more and more of a conflict with them, which is going to lead to ultimately his death. I want to go to chapter 11, and we're going to look at verses 27 through 33. And I want to just kind of dig into this a little bit. So it says, and they came again to Jerusalem, and as he was walking in the temple, the chief priests and the scribes and the elders came to him. And they said to him, by what authority are you doing these things? Or who gave you this authority to do them? Jesus said to them, I will ask you one question, answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Was the baptism of John from heaven or from man? Answer me. And they discussed it with one another, saying, if we say from heaven, he will say, then why do you not believe him? But shall we say from man? They were afraid of the people, for they all held that John was a prophet. So they answered Jesus, we do not know. And Jesus said to them, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. So when you think about this war of words right there, right? We're questioning one another. What jumps out to you either about Jesus or about the religious leaders?
They know their full position, their knowledge, everything is out of that. They're not going to just give that up. They understand that law. You think they will figure that out?
Yeah. I mean, they're going to lose what they have. And you think about it, everyone's waiting for the Messiah. I mean, they're not opposed to the idea of